Baku has always been a circuit where legends are either made or broken, and on that Friday evening, the streets echoed with something special. Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari darted through the castle section with millimetre precision, the steering wheel calm in his hands, the car no longer fighting him, but flowing like an extension of his body. As he crossed the line, the stopwatch told the story. 1 minute, 41.293 seconds. Faster than last year's pole position. Faster than anyone expected from a Ferrari that had looked unstable and unpredictable just hours earlier. In that instant, the narrative shifted. For years, Charles Leclerc had been the king of Baku, the man who ruled these razor-thin walls with unmatched apex speed and fearless consistency. But now the crown was being tested. Hamilton, still new to the SF25 and still adapting to its quirks, had just delivered a lap that felt like a statement. The telemetry showed no desperation, no wild corrections, only harmony between driver and machine. It wasn't just a quick time on the board, it was a breakthrough, the kind that leaves rivals stunned and teammates uneasy. Just a few hours before that stunning lap, nothing about Ferrari suggested this kind of pace was possible. Free Practice 1 was a reminder of the pain from Monza, where the car slid across the surface instead of biting into it. The SF25 lacked the front-end grip needed to attack the corners, and in Baku's tight 90-degree turns, that weakness was magnified. Hamilton struggled to keep the car under control, overshooting braking zones in Sector 3, even brushing the wall in a flash of scarlet that sent a shiver through the garage. It was clear the Ferrari still felt alien to him, a machine that demanded to be wrestled rather than trusted. On the other side of the garage, Leclerc, usually so calm and confident here, was forced to fight relentless understeer that robbed him of rhythm. His radio messages carried a tone of frustration that the team rarely hears at his strongest circuit. The timing sheets made the picture even bleaker. Ferrari were losing chunks of time in the opening 2 sectors, bleeding grip where rivals seemed planted. McLaren in particular looked sharp, their car stable under braking and quick on traction, everything Ferrari desperately lacked. Inside the team, the mood was heavy. Engineers exchanged quiet nods, knowing they faced yet another weekend of firefighting, searching for balance that seemed just out of reach. Baku, though, is not like any other circuit. It stretches out with a 2-kilometre straight that demands raw speed, then folds into a maze of razor-thin castle walls where millimetres decide whether you set a record or end up in the barriers. This is a track that punishes hesitation, but rewards absolute commitment. One wrong input, one missed apex, and the lap is gone. Ferrari knew this better than anyone, and after the struggles of the first session, the engineers were forced into difficult choices. They didn't have the luxury of major upgrades or revolutionary fixes, only the option to adjust what they could. Rear wing angles were shifted, mechanical balance tweaked, searching for that elusive compromise between top-end velocity on the straights and stability through the tight, twisting middle sector. It was the classic Baku puzzle, the eternal risk-reward balance of chasing maximum speed without sacrificing the control needed to thread a car through the narrowest part of the calendar. For Ferrari, every small adjustment felt like a gamble, and the stakes could not have been higher. When the cars returned to the track for Free Practice 2, the mood began to change. The sun dipped lower, the air cooled, and the asphalt started to rubber in, creating conditions that mirrored qualifying and the race itself. Ferrari sent Hamilton out with a bold choice: a higher downforce setup, a gamble that traded straight-line speed for the promise of greater stability under braking and more confidence in the corners. On paper, it looked like a costly compromise, but almost immediately it transformed the way the SF25 behaved. The steering traces became smoother, the throttle application more consistent, and the telemetry began flashing green sector after green sector. For the first time all season, Hamilton wasn't fighting the car through every corner. He was flowing with it, guiding it with precision rhythm, braking later, carrying more speed through the apex, and unleashing the kind of lap that felt effortless to watch but demanded perfection to deliver. In those cooler evening conditions, the harmony between driver and machine finally came alive. The stopwatch confirmed it. Hamilton's lap was quicker by just 74 thousandths of a second. To anyone glancing at the results, that margin looked tiny, barely the blink of an eye. But inside Ferrari, it landed like a thunderclap. For 4 straight years, Charles Leclerc had been the undisputed Prince of Baku, the man who owned these streets with poles that seemed untouchable. Yet now, On a Friday evening, in equal machinery, Hamilton had stripped that crown away. The effect was immediate. Leclerc's usually calm voice on the radio carried an edge, frustration creeping into words that normally sounded measured. He complained about losing too much on corner entry, searching for reasons, perhaps even excuses, for how the script had been flipped. And inside the team, the meaning was impossible to ignore. For the first time, Ferrari's engineers and strategists had not one but two benchmarks to weigh equally. The hierarchy that once revolved around Leclerc's authority suddenly felt shaken, and with Hamilton proving his claim in the most symbolic of places, the balance of power inside Maranello began to shift. What made Ferrari's turnaround even more striking was the way both drivers took completely different paths to speed. Hamilton chose the high downforce setup, loading the car with extra stability for the braking zones and the tight middle sector. Leclerc, on the other hand, trimmed the car for maximum velocity down Baku's endless straights, chasing every bit of top-end speed he could find. On paper, one of those approaches should have come out on top, but instead both delivered. Hamilton's advantage came in the castle section, where his car gripped with confidence and allowed him to carry more minimum speed through the narrowest corners on the calendar. Leclerc's trimmed-out Ferrari, though nervous under braking, rocketed down the straights with a top speed Hamilton couldn't touch. For once, Ferrari didn't have to choose between one direction or the other. Both worked. It was a rare moment of adaptability, a sign that the team finally had a car capable of delivering pace in more than one way. In a sport where flexibility often becomes the ultimate strategic weapon, Ferrari suddenly held a dual advantage they had not enjoyed in years. While Ferrari found themselves unlocking pace from both directions, their rivals stumbled in ways that only made Maranello's rise more dramatic. McLaren, who had looked so solid in earlier rounds, saw their weekend unravel almost immediately. Lando Norris clipped the wall at turn 4, the front right suspension folding on impact and forcing him to limp back to the pits before the mechanics wheeled the car away for good. His session was over before it truly began. Oscar Piastri fared little better, brushing the barriers on his final push lap and leaving his data incomplete. Mercedes faced a different kind of problem. Their balance looked steady, but steady without speed is no comfort in Formula One. George Russell's radio summed it up in blunt frustration. "We're just too slow." Then there was Red Bull, usually untouchable in these moments, suddenly looking unsettled. Max Verstappen's RB21 twitched under braking, snapped on traction, and bled 0.2 of a second in Sector 2 alone. For the first time in months, the benchmark had shifted. Ferrari weren't chasing anyone else's numbers. Instead, rivals were staring at telemetry screens trying to understand how they had fallen behind. The psychological ripple was clear. Maranello had seized control of the narrative. As the session moved into long-run simulations, the real story began to emerge. Single-lap pace grabs the headlines, but race pace is where championships are decided, and here, Ferrari looked even stronger. Hamilton's stint on the medium tyre was a masterclass in control. Lap after lap, his times stayed steady, within a single tenth over 6 consecutive laps. Proof that the car was not only fast, but also kind to its tyres. On the other side, Leclerc's lower drag setup produced slightly higher top speeds on the straights. Yet what impressed most was the way his car held its performance. Over 8 laps, his times dropped by barely 0.3, showing minimal degradation compared to their rivals. Red Bull, usually the standard in tyre management, struggled as Verstappen's rear left overheated, forcing him to lift earlier into braking zones and costing him valuable rhythm. Mercedes faded too, their times slipping by 6 to 7/10 over a similar run, a deficit that could not be disguised by fuel loads or track evolution. For once, it was Ferrari who looked not only quick, but consistent, holding a race pace advantage that gave them supremacy on the very metric that matters most over a full Grand Prix distance. The contrast with Monza could not have been sharper. Back then, Hamilton's radio messages carried the sound of frustration and defeat, a driver broken by a car that refused to obey. In Baku, the tone was completely different. His words were calm, measured, and confident, the kind of composure that spreads through an entire garage. The engineers staring at telemetry screens could feel it. The mechanics who had lived through weeks of struggle could see it in his body language. Free practice too wasn't just about a fast lap for Hamilton. It was about belief. For the first time since joining Ferrari, the SF25 no longer felt like an alien machine. It bent to his style, it flowed with his rhythm, and it finally allowed him to show the precision that built his legacy. In that moment, The harmony between driver and car was undeniable. What had once felt like an impossible partnership now looked like the beginning of a redemption arc, and the entire team drew strength from it. For years, Charles Leclerc has carried the weight of Ferrari on his shoulders, the talisman who kept hope alive through seasons of struggle and near misses. He was the anchor, the driver around whom every strategy, every gamble, and every long-term plan revolved. But in Baku, that image began to crack. To be beaten, not by circumstance or bad luck, but by his own teammate on the very track where he built his reputation, was something new. The aura of untouchability that surrounded him here started to fade. And with it came a shift inside Ferrari that could not be ignored. Strategy meetings that once automatically favoured Leclerc now had to weigh Hamilton's data with equal seriousness. Decisions would no longer be made with a single reference point. There were two. And for the tifosi, the passionate Ferrari faithful, emotions began to split. Some still saw Leclerc as their chosen leader, while others whispered that Hamilton might be the man to finally deliver what had been missing for so long. The authority Leclerc once held unquestioned was suddenly under challenge, and Maranello found itself recalibrating. One weekend alone cannot decide a championship, but momentum has a way of rewriting the story of a season. What Ferrari showed in Baku hinted at more than just a strong Friday. It hinted at a formula that could carry them into the title fight. If they can sustain this level of form, the points swing across the coming races could become decisive. Verstappen's lead, once looking untouchable, suddenly feels vulnerable when Red Bull shows signs of weakness. McLaren have speed but lack consistency, while Mercedes seems steady yet always a step behind. In contrast, Ferrari now holds something rare: adaptability. With one car tuned for outright speed on the straights and the other dialed in for stability through the corners, they can attack circuits from both directions without losing pace. That kind of strategic flexibility is not just an advantage for one race. It's a weapon that can tilt the balance of an entire season. And if the battle really does go all the way to Abu Dhabi, it is weekends like this that could be remembered as the turning point. And so the image that lingers is Hamilton threading the castle section, the scarlet Ferrari brushing past stone walls with millimetre accuracy, not a single movement wasted. It was the kind of lap that felt less like survival and more like control, a reminder of why he has built a career on moments just like this. The question, though, is whether it was the start of something real or simply a Friday night mirage. Was this the breakthrough where Ferrari finally turned from firefighting to fighting for wins? Or will the old struggles return when the pressure of qualifying and race day arrives? For now, what matters is the feeling it created, the sense that Ferrari, long trapped in disappointment, might have found their pivot point. A championship is not won in one practice session, but sometimes belief is. In Baku, the crown felt momentarily reclaimed, and with it came the possibility that the story of this season is not yet written, that Ferrari's resurgence could be more than just a dream.